Welcome back to Charette Theory. In today's video, we're embracing the arrival of spring and breathing new life into a historic Tudor-style living room. Tudor Revival homes are beloved for their rich woodwork, arched doorways, and timeless charm. But when spring comes around, there's something truly magical about blending that old-world warmth with fresh, cheerful seasonal touches. Whether you're working with authentic period interiors or simply love that cozy storybook aesthetic, this guide will show you how to thoughtfully incorporate spring decor while honoring the character of your space. Let's walk through beautiful, detailed ways to refresh your Tudor-inspired living room for spring, from floral arrangements and textiles to ambient lighting and vintage touches. Nothing evokes the gentle arrival of spring quite like the quiet, graceful presence of flowers. They are nature's most poetic gesture, a soft awakening after the stillness of winter. And in the context of a Tudor-style living room, where deep wood tones, ornate beams, and medieval silhouettes create a sense of rooted history, the introduction of spring florals offers a much-needed breath of life and light. The contrast between the architecture's old-world weight and the delicate flutter of seasonal blooms creates a visual and emotional harmony that feels both intentional and timeless. When choosing florals for a Tudor interior, think of what might bloom along the stone walls of an English cottage or spill over the edge of a countryside garden. Prioritize varieties that feel gentle, romantic, and slightly unkempt, those that carry the elegance of nature without formality. Tulips are a perfect starting point, with their curved stems and vibrant yet soft petals, available in a wide array of springtime hues from blush pink to buttercream yellow. Daffodils, cheerful and classic, bring a burst of golden sunlight indoors. Lilacs, with their fragrant clusters of tiny blossoms, introduce a soft, nostalgic mood and a lavender-toned glow. And then there are peonies, abundant and ruffled, like silk dresses caught in a breeze, adding fullness and a sense of indulgence to any arrangement. Fresh flowers are always ideal. Their scent, their organic imperfections, and their ephemeral beauty align so well with the spirit of the season. But faux flowers can also play a powerful role, especially in preserving a spring look throughout the entire season. The key is in the quality. Look for silk or paper florals that mimic natural movement and variation in color. A well-made faux lilac or peony, when styled thoughtfully, can blend seamlessly into a vignette of vintage accessories and real greenery. The aesthetic goal here is to create floral compositions that feel slightly wild, as though they were casually gathered from the garden at first light. Avoid overly structured bouquets or tight, symmetrical arrangements. Instead, let some stems rise higher than others, allow greenery to spill over the edges, and embrace asymmetry. This naturalistic styling complements the lived-in character of Tudor interiors and echoes the rhythm of nature. As for placement, the opportunities are endless. A loose arrangement of blooms on a carved wooden side table brings color and scent to a corner otherwise wrapped in shadow. A small bouquet tucked into a window nook catches the afternoon sun, casting soft, dappled shadows on the sill. On the mantel, flanked by antique candlesticks or leaded glass panels, a larger floral centerpiece can act as a seasonal altar, celebrating growth, renewal, and the promise of warmer days. With just a few well-placed florals, your living room becomes something more than just a historic space. It becomes a living storybook scene, where spring itself seems to walk through the door. In a Tudor-style living room, Every detail matters, and that includes what holds your spring flowers. While the blooms themselves may bring color and life, the vessels you place them in are equally vital in telling the seasonal story within the room. In a space defined by history, craftsmanship, and character, the choice of vases must feel intentional, authentic, and full of quiet charm. Rather than defaulting to modern glass cylinders or sleek ceramics, seek out vessels that feel like they could have been passed down through generations, pieces with patina, texture, and presence. Antique-style vases anchor the floral arrangements into the broader visual language of the room. They act as subtle storytellers, whispering of centuries past, even as they hold the freshness of today's spring blooms. Look for earthenware pitchers, hand-thrown ceramic jugs, or tarnished brass urns. These pieces often feature irregular shapes, fine cracks in the glaze, or softly faded patterns. Signs not of age alone, but of memory. An etched crystal vase from a flea market, a blue and white porcelain jug inherited from a grandparent, or a rustic copper pot can all become perfect anchors for your floral displays. These objects aren't just containers, they're tactile links to tradition. When styling these vases, consider their placement within the architecture of the room. A long, low ceramic piece placed on a timbered mantel can frame a fireplace scene, especially when flanked by candle holders or antique books. A slender glass bud vase filled with just one or two stems can grace a narrow windowsill or the edge of a built-in bookshelf, catching light and scent with every breeze. Larger statement pieces, perhaps a tall urn filled with lilac branches, can hold their own on a sideboard or an entry table, drawing the eye upward and adding drama without disrupting the room's historic serenity. Mixing and matching vase types can also bring visual rhythm and authenticity to your space. Just like the layered history within a Tudor home, where additions and evolutions accumulate over time, a curated collection of varied vessels suggests a life well lived. Display them in quiet clusters, allowing the flowers to bridge their differences and unify the display. And don't be afraid of imperfections. A chipped rim or a slightly off-center handle only adds to the story. These marks of time echo the architectural bones of your home, the way old beams creak in the spring thaw, or how sunlight carves new lines across a well-worn floor. In this setting, the vase is not merely an object, it's a character. It reflects the soul of the room and supports the fleeting beauty of spring with grounded elegance. Together with your floral choices, it helps your Tudor-style living room speak not just of the season, but of history alive with renewal. As spring begins to stir the world awake, there's something deeply grounding about bringing living greenery indoors, especially into a Tudor-style space where wood, stone, and wrought iron often dominate. In these richly textured interiors, where the architecture itself speaks in centuries, plants act as a gentle foil, soft, breathing, ever-growing. They invite movement and air into the room, blurring the line between indoors and the garden just beyond the window. But not just any greenery will do. In a Tudor Revival living room, it's best to choose plants that harmonize with the room's heritage, rather than fight it. Think of greenery that might have graced the sill of a medieval cottage or crept across the stones of an old manor courtyard, plants with a timeless, slightly wild quality. English ivy is a natural fit. Its trailing vines echo the twisting patterns of Gothic arches, and when allowed to cascade gently from a bookshelf or a high shelf near the window, it adds a fairy tale softness to even the darkest timber. Ferns, too, with their feathery textures and ancient lineage, feel right at home in these surroundings. They thrive in shaded corners and lend a woodland quality to fireplaces or low seating areas. You might also consider bringing in potted herbs, rosemary, thyme, lavender. These not only provide greenery but infuse the room with subtle, earthy fragrances that awaken the senses. Their small, sculptural forms look particularly charming in rustic terracotta pots, mismatched clay bowls, or even repurposed antique vessels like copper kettles or enamel pitchers. A rosemary bush placed on a low stool by the window can catch the morning sun, while a trio of lavender plants on the mantel can softly perfume the air as you pass by. What makes these choices feel especially fitting is that they don't try to modernize the space. Instead, they add to its texture and depth. A vine curling around the edge of an old bookshelf. A pot nestled into a wooden windowsill worn smooth by time. A tiny fern sitting in the recessed arch of a built-in niche. These details don't shout for attention, but they whisper, gently, of life. To style plants thoughtfully in a Tudor setting, try layering sizes and heights. Cluster smaller pots together for an old-world gardener's corner. Tuck larger plants near chairs or beneath windows where they can soften architectural angles. Use stands made of iron, dark wood, or woven wicker, materials that blend with the home's natural palette. Let the greenery interact with the room rather than just sitting inside it. Let leaves brush against tapestry-like fabrics or spill over onto books and antique boxes. And remember, imperfection is part of the charm. A slightly leggy vine, a misshapen clay pot, a few curling leaves, these are not flaws, but reminders of life in motion. In a space like this, where history is always present in the walls, introducing living greenery is not just decoration. It is a way of acknowledging the continuity of time, a celebration of what is old, what is growing, and what is yet to bloom. Windows are the eyes of a room, and in a Tudor-style living room, they are steeped in character. Often framed in dark-stained wood, topped with pointed arches, or patterned with leaded panes, these windows are architectural heirlooms. They don't just open to the outdoors, they frame it, like painted vignettes of changing skies, blooming gardens, and the slow rhythm of light moving across the day. As spring unfolds, these windows become more than just sources of illumination, they're invitations. Invitations for sunlight to enter in golden streaks, for breezes to stir the still air, for softness to replace the weight of colder months. And one of the most graceful ways to honor this seasonal shift is through the choice of curtains. Linen or cotton curtains, especially in soft pastel tones or delicate floral prints, are ideal for this transition. They feel fresh, breathable, and quietly elegant, perfect companions to the aged wood, plaster, and ironwork that define Tudor interiors. These natural fabrics drape gently without feeling stiff, and they allow sunlight to diffuse into the room with a warm, flattering glow. Choose colors that echo the palette of a spring garden, sage green like the first leaves, blush pink like early magnolias, creamy ivory like blooming dockwood, pale lavender like lilacs at their peak. These shades bring life into the room without disrupting its quiet sophistication. They don't shout, they whisper, softly weaving seasonal color into a space known for its depth and mood. Florals, too, can play a beautiful role here, especially when rendered in vintage-style prints that feel pulled from antique textiles or forgotten wallpaper. Consider muted wildflower patterns, scrolling vines, or faded botanical illustrations in a gentle wash of spring color. These prints lend visual interest and a touch of narrative, making each curtain panel feel like a story in fabric. The way you hang the curtains matters just as much as the fabric itself. Use simple rods in black wrought iron or aged brass to stay consistent with the Tudor character. Let the panels fall all the way to the floor, just brushing it, or pooling slightly for added romance. Avoid overly tailored or modern pleats, instead, embrace soft folds, relaxed headers, or even ties made of matching fabric to keep the look charming and undone. What's magical about linen and cotton is their movement. On a breezy afternoon, these fabrics will ripple gently, catching the light as they sway. They animate the room, subtly echoing the natural movement outside, a branch swaying, a petal falling, a curtain lifting. And in this way, the indoors and outdoors become more connected. The house breathes. Pair the curtains with complementary elements to complete the effect. A potted herb on the windowsill. A vase of daffodils catching the light. A woven chair cushion nearby in a matching hue. These layers create cohesion and rhythm, tying the curtains into the overall spring palette of the room. This simple change, the introduction of soft, seasonal fabric at the window, can be one of the most impactful in a spring refresh. It alters how light enters the room. It softens the lines of the architecture. It changes how you feel moving through the space. And most importantly, it acknowledges the season in a way that is respectful, refined, and deeply rooted in the sensibilities of a Tudor home. Curtains, after all, are not just about privacy or decoration. In a room rich with history, they become part of the narrative, telling us that the season has shifted, and with it, the feeling of the home. And in spring, that feeling is lighter, brighter, and infinitely more alive. One of the most effortless yet impactful ways to introduce the spirit of spring into your Tudor-style living room is through the thoughtful use of throw pillows. These small decorative accents may seem modest at first glance, but they hold the power to completely shift the mood of a space, especially in a home where darker woods, stone fireplaces, and richly textured architecture are the norm. As spring returns with its promise of renewal, pillows become the perfect canvas for bringing in fresh color, playful pattern, and a sense of softness that balances the room's historic gravitas. Begin by choosing a seasonal palette that reflects nature's tender reawakening. Think of sage green, the color of newly unfurled leaves, or the herbs in a sunny kitchen garden. Blush pink evokes the earliest petals of a blooming rose or apple blossoms caught in the wind. Soft butter yellow channels the warmth of morning sunlight, while pale lavender whispers of lilac hedges and distant wildflowers. These colors not only brighten the space but blend beautifully with the muted, organic tones often found in Tudor Revival interiors. Beyond solid colors, let vintage-inspired patterns bring character and texture to the room. Toile designs, with their pastoral scenes and delicate line work, feel especially at home in a setting steeped in European influence. Classic ticking stripes, once common in cottage upholstery, add a rustic rhythm that plays well against carved wood and stone details. And of course, floral motifs, from intricate tapestries to faded chintz, echo the blooms outside your window, softening the strong lines of the architecture with a romantic touch. Layering is key to creating a cozy yet curated look. Combine these pattern pillows with textured neutrals, think oatmeal linen, raw silk, or nubby cotton, to create dimension and keep the arrangement from feeling overly themed or flat. Vary the sizes and shapes of your pillows as well. A large square pillow in blush toile might sit behind a smaller lumber cushion in sage velvet, with a pale yellow linen piece completing the trio. The mix feels both deliberate and lived in, much like the layered history of the home itself. Placement is just as important as palette. Scatter pillows across a dark leather Chesterfield, along a carved wooden settee, or on a window seat nestled beneath leaded glass. Let them soften the corners and invite you in. Their color, pattern, and texture work together not just to refresh the space visually, but to make it feel ready for open windows, fresh air, and longer days. In this way, throw pillows become more than just accessories, they become harbingers of spring. Quietly, beautifully, they shift the tone of the room from winter's introspection to the lightness and renewal of the season ahead. As the warmth of spring begins to settle in, there's a natural desire to shed winter's weight, to invite softness, lightness, and ease into every corner of the home. In a Tudor-style living room, where the architecture is bold and storied, one of the most graceful ways to introduce this seasonal shift is through the quiet layering of lightweight throws or spring quilts. These textiles serve not only a functional role, offering warmth on early spring mornings or cool, rainy afternoons, but also a visual one. They act as gentle mediators between the dark woods and leather textures of traditional Tudor interiors and the breezy lightness of the season. When carefully chosen and thoughtfully placed, a throw becomes more than a blanket, it becomes a statement of comfort, personality, and transformation. Look for fabrics that breathe: cotton, linen, or even a delicate gauze weave. These materials feel fresh to the touch and fall beautifully across the arms of chairs, the backs of benches, or the foot of a settee. Soft pastels are always appropriate this time of year: muted rose, dusty sky blue, pale buttercream, or a quiet sage green, but you can also lean into faded florals, small ginghams, or hand-stitched patchwork that echo the rustic charm of English cottages and countryside estates. Texture plays an equally important role. A lightly crinkled linen throw introduces a casual elegance. A hand-quilted cotton blanket with floral or botanical stitching adds storytelling through craft. Crocheted lace or subtly fringed edges offer visual detail that reads as vintage rather than trendy, grounding the look in history rather than novelty. These details, often overlooked, are precisely what makes the styling feel intimate and authentic. Drape throws with intention but not perfection. The beauty of spring decor lies in its softness and spontaneity. Let a corner of a quilt cascade to the floor, or casually toss a light blanket over the side of a carved wood bench so that it invites someone to sit and stay a while. Fold a floral throw at the foot of a velvet settee or layer two contrasting textures, say, a linen throw beneath a lace-edged one, for a cozy, gathered feel. For added charm, place a folded quilt inside a woven basket near the hearth, or let a throw peek out from an antique trunk beside the reading chair. These tactile cues make the room feel lived in, ready, and lovingly curated for the season. In a home where history is always present, in the beams overhead, in the worn edges of a wooden staircase, throws and quilts offer a soft, humanizing touch. They warm not only the body but the space itself. And in spring, that warmth takes on a lighter, more hopeful quality, like the first sunbeam that falls across your lap in the early hours of a quiet April morning. As evening settles over a Tudor-style living room, light becomes something more than illumination. It becomes atmosphere, memory, and magic. In spring, when daylight lingers but doesn't yet stretch into the late hours of summer, ambient lighting fills the transitional space between golden hour and nightfall. And few lighting elements evoke the timeless coziness of a Tudor home quite like candlelight, soft, flickering, and deeply rooted in tradition. Brass and wrought iron candle holders are the natural companions for this kind of setting. Their materials are not only historically accurate, but visually grounding, weighty, weathered, and rich with patina. These aren't decorative afterthoughts, they are sculptural objects that speak to the heritage of the home. Their presence feels as though it has always belonged in the room, echoing centuries of evening rituals, quiet suppers, and fireside conversations. Brass offers a warmth that gleams when touched by candlelight. It reflects soft amber hues onto nearby wood and stone, adding layers of richness to even the simplest of vignettes. A pair of tall brass candlesticks on a mantel, flanking a spring floral arrangement, creates a scene that's equal parts pastoral and regal. Shorter, sturdier brass holders on a side table or windowsill invite intimacy, a quiet glow that softens the room's architectural lines and beckons you to sit and unwind. Wrought iron, by contrast, lends a rustic solemnity. Its dark, hand-forged appearance pairs beautifully with the Tudor aesthetic, especially when styled in clusters. Place iron candle holders in a row along a console, or use a candelabrum as a centerpiece on a long wooden table. Their silhouettes, strong and imperfect, cast dramatic shadows that echo the leaded patterns in nearby windows or the lines of timber beams overhead. Spring offers the opportunity to style these holders with a seasonally inspired touch. Consider tucking sprigs of fresh greenery, perhaps a bit of ivy, rosemary, or lavender, around the candle bases, binding them with natural twine or letting them trail naturally onto the surface below. A few small blossoms or a ring of moss at the base of each candle adds an earthy softness that feels completely in tune with the season's quiet awakening. Safety and practicality can also be styled beautifully. If you prefer not to use open flame, high-quality lead tapers with a flickering effect offer a nearly indistinguishable alternative. When placed in antique holders and dimmed appropriately, they still cast that golden, storybook glow that makes a Tudor living room feel like a sanctuary. Candlelight in a room like this doesn't just light the space, it transforms it. It dances across the grain of wood, glimmers against the brass, and casts romantic shadows onto stone and plaster. In spring, when the natural world outside is beginning to glow with life, this gentle, historic light brings a sense of warmth, intimacy, and timelessness indoors. While candlelight adds an undeniably romantic atmosphere to a Tudor style living room, it's the combination of lighting elements that truly defines the mood, especially in the shifting softness of spring. As the sun sets later and the natural light changes hour by hour, layering your lighting sources allows the room to remain warm and visually balanced. This is where lanterns and vintage-style lamps come into play, quiet companions to the architectural drama of the space, and essential to cultivating a lived-in, inviting glow. In a home where timber beams arc overhead and windows wear their diamond pane-leaded glass like jewelry, modern lighting often feels out of place. But antique-style lanterns and heirloom-inspired lamps slip seamlessly into the narrative. They echo the craftsmanship and character of the space while offering both function and beauty. Their materials: wrought iron, aged brass, milk glass, ceramic bases, speak the same design language as carved oak mantels and stone hearths. Imagine a wrought iron lantern, hung beside an entryway nook, casting soft golden light through frosted glass panels. Or a squat brass lamp with a pleated linen shade resting on a carved end table, its bulb warmed to a gentle amber tone. These are not just sources of light, they are anchors of ambience. They fill corners with softness, add a glow to bookshelves, and turn a simple reading chair into a sanctuary. Spring is a time for rethinking how light lives in your space. Swap out harsh white bulbs for warm-toned LEDs that mimic candlelight. This subtle change makes all the difference, enhancing the textures of old wood, revealing the weave of linen curtains, and giving the room that coveted golden hour hue, even after the sun has dipped below the horizon. Lanterns, especially when styled in clusters or used in unexpected places, bring a sense of medieval charm. Consider placing one on the floor near a fireplace, inside a built-in alcove, or on the landing of a staircase. Their shape and glow become sculptural elements, especially when paired with greenery or springtime florals. A small lantern nestled on a window ledge beside a potted herb, or perched atop a stack of vintage books, creates a still-life effect that feels as authentic as it is atmospheric. Vintage-style table lamps offer versatility. Choose ones with ceramic or glass bases, or those made of turned wood with a lightly distressed finish. Pair them with soft fabric shades in warm ivory, muted floral prints, or even stitched parchment textures to bring depth and softness to the light. A lamp placed near a favorite chair instantly becomes an invitation to read, to write, or simply to sit with a cup of tea and watch the light shift across the walls. Together, lanterns and lamps do more than illuminate. They contribute to the room's rhythm, rising and falling with the light of day, adding intimacy as evening unfolds. In spring, they help blur the boundaries between indoors and out, between story and setting. And in a Tudor-style living room, they remind us that beauty doesn't always need to shine brightly, sometimes it simply needs to glow. In a home steeped in the craftsmanship and character of Tudor design, you might not expect something as contemporary as fairy lights to find their place. And yet, when styled with subtlety and care, they can add a touch of quiet enchantment that feels entirely at home in a springtime storybook interior. Fairy lights, when thoughtfully integrated, don't clash with history, they converse with it. They bring a glimmering softness that mirrors the twilight outside, like fireflies dancing just beyond the leaded glass. Unlike traditional lighting, which often serves a clear, functional purpose, fairy lights are about atmosphere. They are gentle, ambient, and emotive, meant to glow rather than shine. And in spring, when daylight begins to linger and the garden starts to stir, their delicate shimmer feels like a celebration of the season's arrival. It's as if they are capturing the magic in the air and reflecting it back into your home. To preserve the historic soul of a Tudor-style room, choose fairy lights that are warm white in tone, not the cool, bluish hues that feel too synthetic. Look for strands with copper, brass, or deep green wire, colors that blend seamlessly into wood beams, ivy garlands, and bookshelves. Battery-operated versions offer even more freedom in placement, letting you tuck them into corners without the need for visible cords or outlets. Think of these lights as a soft, living thread you can weave through the room's architecture and decor. Drape them along an exposed beam overhead, or wind them through an indoor ivy vine cascading down a wall shelf. Line the edge of a window frame where the natural light fades, or nestle them behind vintage books on a mantel to cast a glow between the spines. The goal is not to overwhelm, but to suggest, to create moments of wonder and softness. For spring styling, consider incorporating fairy lights into seasonal vignettes. Nestle them into a shallow wooden bowl filled with moss, faux eggs, and blossoms to create an illuminated centerpiece. Weave them around a wreath of dried lavender and rosemary hung inside above a hearth. Or simply layer them into a sheer curtain across a tall window, letting them glimmer faintly through the fabric like dew drops catching the morning sun. When night falls and the room is otherwise quiet, the subtle twinkle of fairy lights invites a different kind of stillness. It feels like the hush after a spring rain, or the moment just before a breeze stirs the garden. Their presence is gentle, magical, and deeply comforting, especially when paired with the sturdy beauty of old wood, stone, and iron. In the context of a Tudor-style living room, fairy lights become something more than decoration. They become an experience, a soft, sparkling bridge between the past and the present, between history and imagination. And in spring, they remind us that every home, no matter how historic, has room for a little light-hearted wonder. As spring breathes new life into the landscape beyond your windows, it also offers the perfect moment to refresh what hangs on your walls. In a Tudor style living room, where architectural elements like plaster walls, dark wood paneling, and arched doorways create a timeless backdrop, wall art serves not only as decoration, but as a reflection of the season's spirit. By thoughtfully swapping out heavy winter scenes or somber portraiture in favor of spring-inspired artwork, you allow your space to shift with the light, softening, blooming, and waking up, just like the world outside. Botanical prints are a natural choice for this transformation. Their delicate lines, earthy palettes, and scientific charm evoke a sense of vintage curiosity and garden reverence. Look for antique-style illustrations, those depicting tulips, daffodils, lilacs, or herbs with hand-labeled Latin names beneath them. These pieces feel like they could have once belonged to an old apothecary or a country manor's library. Grouped in a grid, framed in wood or gold, they create a quiet gallery that nods to both nature and tradition. Equally fitting are floral oil paintings, especially those that lean toward impressionistic or folk styles. A vase of peonies on a worn table, a field of wildflowers beneath a cloudy sky, or even a close-up of a single blooming rose, all invite a softness that complements the solid lines and moody textures of Tudor design. These paintings introduce color in gentle, organic ways, echoing the floral arrangements and textiles that now inhabit the space for the season. Countryside landscapes also deserve a place in the spring wall refresh. Scenes of rolling green hills, stone bridges over blooming rivers, or sun-dappled garden paths can evoke the pastoral beauty of England's countryside, the same romantic landscape that Tudor design itself draws so much of its atmosphere from. These images create a sense of story, as though the room you inhabit is merely a chapter in a larger, open-air novel. When swapping your artwork, think of frames as part of the overall composition. Choose those that speak to the Tudor aesthetic: aged wood, distressed gold, carved details. Avoid modern, sleek borders that feel too crisp for the room's character. In fact, mismatched frames can often feel more authentic, as though each piece of art was collected over time, inherited, or discovered in a market abroad. Placement matters, too. Hang a single floral study above a reading nook, or cluster smaller prints near a window where the real garden lies just beyond. Place a larger painting above the hearth as a seasonal focal point, replacing a winter tapestry or darker work. Even leaning smaller pieces on shelves or a mantel, layered casually among books, vases, and spring greenery, can add artistic texture without feeling staged. In this way, your wall art becomes more than just a visual update, it becomes a seasonal offering. A reflection of what's blooming, not only in the world outside, but in your own home. And as the light shifts and the days stretch forward, these images quietly remind you that beauty doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes, it simply grows. In a Tudor-style living room, where the walls tell stories through plaster texture and timber grain, the frame around a piece of art is never just a border, it's a part of the room's language. As you refresh your wall decor for spring, the choice of frame becomes just as important as the artwork it holds. It speaks to era, to materiality, to mood. And in a room where authenticity and warmth are woven into every detail, wooden and antique gold frames feel not only appropriate, but essential. Wooden frames, especially those in warm tones like oak, walnut, or chestnut, ground your spring-themed art in the architectural heritage of the room. They echo the carved beams above, the paneled doors, the built-in window seats. Their natural textures, knots, ridges, worn edges, create a visual continuity that connects floor to ceiling, shelf to sill. A botanical print in a narrow, slightly distressed walnut frame feels as if it's always belonged on the wall beside your hearth. A landscape in a heavy, beveled oak frame over the mantel doesn't call attention to itself, it becomes part of the room's structure. Antique gold frames, by contrast, bring a soft glow and quiet elegance. Not shiny or ostentatious, but muted, brushed gold leaf, dulled by time, perhaps with a touch of patina. These frames pair especially well with floral oil paintings or portraits, adding lightness and formality without clashing with the rustic weight of the architecture. A gallery wall of pressed flower studies or faded watercolors in varied gold frames offers a layered, curated feeling, like a collection grown slowly over decades. In spring, these materials feel particularly suited to the season's subtler light. As the days grow longer and the sunlight softens, the warm hues in the wood and gold catch that natural glow beautifully. Morning light may glint softly along a gilded edge, a dusky shadow might deepen the grain of a wood frame. The changing sun brings the frames to life, casting ever-shifting reflections and shadows that lend quiet dynamism to your walls. Consider frame shape and scale, too. Mix rectangular and oval silhouettes. Try petite frames for small vignettes, a miniature bird print tucked into a bookshelf, or a large statement piece over the sofa. Let the collection feel organic, not overly matched. A Tudor-style room benefits from a sense of layers or of story, of age, of things gathered and cherished. And perhaps most importantly, allow the frames to feel a bit imperfect. A small chip in a corner, a speckled mirror plate finish, or the uneven stain of old wood are not flaws. They're invitations to look closer. To remember that beauty lives in history, in touch, in texture. In choosing wooden and antique gold frames for your spring decor, you're not just hanging pictures. You're framing moments. Framing light. Framing the delicate balance between past and present, between structure and bloom. It's a quiet decision, but one that brings the entire room into harmony with the season outside. As spring unfurls its charm across your Tudor-style living room, it's the smallest details that often speak the loudest. While flowers, fabrics, and lighting set the tone, it's the little objects tucked into corners, perched on mantels, or resting on window sills that create a sense of whimsy and wonder, those quiet nods to the season that make a home feel thoughtfully curated and delightfully lived in. Ceramic rabbits, bird figurines, and antique-style clocks with botanical or pastoral motifs are perfect examples of such details. They're not loud or overstated, yet their presence infuses the room with character, a kind of visual poetry that bridges the gap between historic elegance and the playful freshness of spring. A ceramic rabbit, for instance, nestled among books on a wooden shelf or placed at the edge of a sideboard, brings a storybook quality to the room. Choose one with a weathered glaze or crackled finish. Something that looks as though it's been handed down from a grandmother's garden room or discovered at a countryside antique market. Whether standing upright or mid-hop, these creatures evoke the spirit of awakening that defines the season. Bird figurines offer a similarly gentle presence. Delicate and symbolic, they represent freedom, song, and the return of life to the branches just outside your Tudor casement windows. A pair of small doves or sparrows, perched on a mantelpiece or tucked beside a potted plant, creates a charming tableau. Go for figurines in natural tones, ivory, sage, dusty blue, or ones with hand-painted floral details for a bit of unexpected color. Antique-style clocks, meanwhile, do more than tell time. They anchor the room with a sense of rhythm and heritage. Look for mantel clocks with floral motifs on porcelain faces, or wall-mounted cuckoo clocks with carved wood and brass pendulums. Even a small round desk clock with Roman numerals can add a quaint, old-world touch. These pieces remind us of the passing hours in a gentle way, are not hurried, but cyclical, like the seasons themselves. The key with all these accessories is restraint and intentionality. A few well-placed objects will have far more impact than a room crowded with collectibles. Let each piece breathe, surrounded by space, so that it feels like a discovery, something your guests might notice only after settling in, after the room has already begun to speak. Groupings can be subtle but poetic. A white ceramic rabbit beside a brass candlestick. A songbird figurine next to a trailing vine on a windowsill. An antique clock nestled between a vase of lilacs and a stack of weathered books. These arrangements bring narrative to your decor, as if each corner is a page in a springtime fairy tale. In a Tudor-style living room, these vintage-inspired seasonal touches offer more than charm. They reinforce the room's identity, rooted in history, layered with meaning, and always in conversation with nature. And in spring, when the world feels tender and new, they remind us that even the smallest details can hold beauty, memory, and joy. Shelving in a Tudor-style living room is more than functional, it's expressive. Whether built into a thick plaster wall, nestled beneath a leaded glass window, or freestanding in the form of a weathered oak bookcase, shelves offer an opportunity to curate the soul of the space. And in spring, when nature reawakens and the light changes hour by hour, styling these surfaces with intention can bring new life to your interiors, without replacing a single piece of furniture. Begin with books, always the heartbeat of a Tudor-style home. Choose volumes with worn spines, cloth covers, or gilded titles. Old gardening books, poetry collections, or vintage novels from the early 20th century carry the quiet dignity of age and add warmth to every shelf. Don't line them up too neatly, allow them to lean, to stack, to feel lived in. A small cluster of green and cream bindings might sit beside a larger coffee table book about English flora. The goal is to make it feel as if the collection has evolved over time, organic, not ornamental. Into this literary foundation, weave the season itself. Dried flowers are especially powerful here, timeless, textural, and deeply evocative. Tuck small bundles of lavender, baby's breath, or dried wildflowers between the pages of open books or lay them gently across a stack. Place a tiny ceramic vase with a single dried bloom beside a miniature portrait frame, or arrange a taller bundle in a glass bottle at the end of a shelf. Their muted tones, mauve, wheat, cream, faded rose, bring a soft romance that aligns beautifully with spring's gentle spirit. Woven baskets, in natural or whitewashed finishes, serve both form and function. On lower shelves, they can hold folded throws, spare pillows, or children's books. On upper shelves, they can serve as containers for pine cones, moss, or potpourri. A shallow basket can display painted wooden eggs, dried citrus slices, or even a candle in a glass jar. Their rustic textures balance out the formality of the room, offering a tactile contrast that feels grounded and real. Layering is the secret to shelf styling in spring. Think in varying heights, materials, and depths. Place a brass candlestick beside a vintage book stack, rest a framed botanical print behind a cluster of ceramic objects, let a sprig of ivy trail over the edge of a shelf toward the floor. Vary the spacing, some shelves can be full, others nearly empty. This ebb and flow keeps the eye moving, keeps the story unfolding. Consider the backdrop, too. If your shelves are enclosed or framed with carved wood, the items inside should create a sense of intimacy, as though each shelf is a little diorama. In open shelving, you might even consider temporarily lining the back panels with floral wallpaper samples, linen fabric, or pressed herbs to add seasonal texture. The effect you're creating is part garden, part library, part cabinet of curiosities. It should feel personal, storied, and welcoming, never overly polished. The dried petals, the aged pages, the soft fray of a linen book spine, all these details whisper of time, memory, and the quiet unfolding of spring. And in a room as textured and storied as a Tudor living room, these styled shelves do more than decorate. They speak. They say, I hear, the past and present meet. Here, the season lives not only outside, but within. In a Tudor-style living room, where architecture leans toward the substantial, exposed beams, carved wood trim, and leaded windows that filter in soft, dappled light, furniture often echoes that weight. Deep leather armchairs, dark-stained woods, and high-backed settees form the backbone of the space. But as spring arrives, carrying with it a sense of airiness and renewal, there's a gentle way to soften these heavier silhouettes. Enter the slipcover. Slipcovers, especially in light natural fabrics, are not about concealing beauty, they're about transforming it for the season. They allow the historic presence of the furniture to remain, while draping it in something lighter, more breathable, and infinitely more inviting. In the springtime home, a slip-covered chair becomes a fresh canvas. A covered bench becomes a pause in a longer story. And the room, as a whole, begins to feel less like a winter retreat and more like a country escape. Choose fabrics that speak the language of the season. Cotton, linen, chambray, or washed muslin. These materials carry a casual elegance, a lived-in texture that feels effortless and grounded. Shades like off-white, pale sage, dusty rose, soft greige, or delicate floral patterns can bring just enough softness to brighten the space without clashing with the room's Tudor bones. A white linen slipcover on a tufted leather armchair introduces contrast and breadth, while a faded floral slip on a bench beside the hearth creates a romantic, old-world vignette. The beauty of slipcovers lies not just in their look, but in their practicality. Spring can be muddy, rainy, and filled with the bustle of pets, children, and gardening boots. A removable cover makes your furniture more forgiving and more livable. It says, "Come in, sit down, stay a while." No need to worry about damp clothes or a stray blossom falling from the bouquet you just carried in from outside. Style your slipcovers to feel intentional but relaxed. Let them be slightly rumpled, loosely tied, or gently gathered at the corners. Add small details, button closures, a ribbon-tied sash, or a scalloped edge that reinforce the charm of the handmade. A slipcover that's too tight or too crisp can feel modern and formal. One that drapes softly over the contours of a piece brings it into spring with grace. You can also layer. Over a light linen slipcover, place a woven throw in a coordinating tone, or a faded quilt folded over the back. Add a pastel or embroidered pillow for a touch of pattern and texture. These layers allow the furniture to evolve throughout the season, to feel adaptable, comfortable, and loved. Slipcovers aren't about covering up history. They're about meeting it where it stands, and inviting it to evolve with the rhythms of the season. In spring, they give the Tudor living room something precious: lightness. Not just in color or fabric, but in feeling. A sense that this is a home alive with change, comfort, and quiet transformation. In the heart of any living room, the coffee table often acts as a stage, quietly inviting pause, reflection, and gathering. In a Tudor-style space, where the architecture already tells a grand story, your coffee table becomes a place where seasonal expression can feel most intimate. And in spring, this surface becomes the perfect canvas for transformation. Styling a coffee table for spring is about creating a still life, a moment that captures the essence of the season while resonating with the old-world soul of the room. The right centerpiece doesn't just sit in the middle, it engages. It draws the eye, anchors the mood, and gently encourages conversation. It says, simply, the season has arrived. Start by grounding the arrangement with a tray. A rustic wooden tray, an aged metal platter, or a hand-thrown ceramic plate creates a visual base, something that both unifies your items and honors the Tudor love of craftsmanship. The tray helps define the space while keeping things feeling intentional and unfussy. Now, let nature take the lead. A small moss nest filled with painted wooden eggs offers a delicate nod to springtime renewal. Use eggs in soft pastels or earthy neutrals, tones that feel at home beside carved wood and stone. Surround the nest with tiny blossoms, sprigs of dried lavender, or even a few feathers for a touch of organic whimsy. Alternatively, try a low ceramic bowl filled with real or faux seasonal florals, perhaps hellebores, lilacs, or tulips, arranged in a loose, garden-picked style. You can also fill a vessel with a handful of fresh herbs, rosemary, mint, or thyme, which not only look beautiful but add fragrance to the room each time someone leans in. Balance softness with structure. Stack a few vintage garden or nature books beneath the arrangement, covers slightly worn, pages thick with texture. Top the stack with a small brass object, a piece of driftwood, or a delicate bird figurine. These layers of material, paper, metal, wood, flora, bring rich contrast and historical texture to the tableau. Candles, too, belong on a springtime coffee table. A small votive in an aged glass jar or a taper in a miniature brass holder adds warmth and romance, especially in the cooler evenings. Tuck in a matchbox with a floral print or calligraphy detail for a subtle moment of charm. Don't forget space for function. A coffee table should always feel livable, leave room for a cup of tea, a book in progress, or a place to rest a hand. The styling should feel like it grew there naturally, not like a display. Let pieces spill over edges slightly, overlap, and breathe. A tulip leaning toward the light, a ribbon of moss escaping the tray, these imperfections are what make it beautiful. In spring, your coffee table becomes a still life poem, a miniature celebration of rebirth, nature, and ease. It bridges the room's architectural depth with the airiness of the season, quietly inviting you to sit down, notice the light, and simply enjoy the moment. in a Tudor-style living room is never just surface deep, it lives in the grain of ancient wood, the patina of stone, the aged bronze of a window latch. It speaks in quiet, confident tones that echo centuries of lived-in tradition. But come spring, even these enduring hues crave a moment of lightness. A shift. A breath. That's where soft pastels and gentle neutrals step in, not to erase the room's storied richness, but to illuminate it from within. Think of this seasonal palette not as a replacement, but as a complement. Soft sage greens that echo new leaves pushing through the soil. Blush pinks that recall the first magnolia petals falling on cobbled garden paths. Dusty blues that mimic early spring skies, streaked with the remnants of winter clouds. Pale lavender, creamy ivory, warm greige, all of these hues bring air, clarity, and softness to the Tudor framework without sacrificing authenticity. Begin subtly. Introduce pastels through the accents you touch and notice every day. Throw pillows, window treatments, linens, ceramics. A sage green pillow on a carved wood bench, the pale rose cotton drape gathered beside a leaded glass window, a ceramic bowl in a washed mint tone sitting atop a heavy walnut table. These are not sweeping changes, but whispers, deliberate and elegant. Textiles are perhaps the most forgiving and expressive place to experiment with this palette. Layer a faded floral quilt over a high-back chair. Swap a dark wool throw for a lightweight, fringed pastel blanket. Choose table linens in soft linen or cotton, washed and crinkled, not crisp, where blush or chamomile yellow offers warmth beneath a teacup or spring bouquet. Even everyday objects can contribute to the seasonal shift. Swap out dark pottery for stoneware in soft neutral glazes. Let your candle holders glow a little warmer, your bookshelves hold a few covers in ivory or sky blue. These subtle gestures of color invite spring into your home with reverence rather than reinvention. The beauty of using pastels and neutrals in a Tudor space lies in the contrast they create. Where once a leather armchair felt weighty and brooding, a soft pillow or throw makes it approachable, even tender. Where dark wood trim once created shadow, a pale ceramic vase beneath it now reflects the light and draws the eye. The interplay of light and dark, of heavy and airy, brings balance to the room, just as spring balances warmth with cool breezes, light with shadow. Importantly, these soft hues age gracefully within a Tudor context. Unlike stark whites or saturated brights, pastels with a muted, chalky, or dusty undertone feel timeless, as though they've been faded by years of sun filtering through leaded glass. They don't jar, they belong. So as you refresh your Tudor living room for spring, let color be the thread that stitches the season into the very fabric of the space. With soft pastels and thoughtful neutrals, you're not rewriting the story, you're adding a beautiful, sunlit chapter. In a Tudor-style living room, wood is not merely material, it's a living memory. It's in the low-slung beams overhead, the carved banisters, the panelled walls that echo centuries of craftsmanship. These warm woods, rich in walnut, oak, chestnut, or elm, ground the space in heritage. They give it weight, presence, and a kind of dignified stillness. But in spring, even the most rooted interiors long for a touch of movement, something fresh, delicate, alive. The key is not to cover the wood, but to accompany it, like a soft voice joining a deep chorus. Pairing warm woods with seasonal accents is an act of balance. The deep, natural tones of Tudor interiors, russet, mahogany, amber, umber, become the perfect foil for lighter, brighter touches. A carved oak side table gleams all the more when topped with a pastel ceramic vase. A heavy mantel becomes newly poetic when scattered with sprigs of flowering branches, or a single ivory taper glowing in a brass holder. Begin by observing where wood lives in your space. A dark wooden bench under a window might be softened with a pale linen cushion and a scatter of spring-toned pillows. A console table near the hearth can hold a basket of dried lavender, a terracotta pot of daffodils, or a hand-painted bowl filled with speckled faux eggs or mossy stones. These organic elements act as a gentle contrast, not fighting the wood's character, but lifting it, illuminating it. Glass and ceramic are natural companions to wood. A translucent glass hurricane on a dark table lets light pass through like morning sun through old windows. A cream-glazed jug with lilacs offers a soft counterpart to the linear grain of a sideboard. Even a delicate lace runner across a wooden surface creates a tactile dialogue, weight and lightness, texture and tone. Consider also the vertical plane. If you have wooden beams or trim, nestle seasonal accents nearby, ivy garlands draped gently along a shelf, small botanical prints framed in aged gold or cream, or hanging herbs that nod to old-world kitchens and apothecaries. The room becomes layered not just in space, but in time, honoring its historical framework while welcoming the now. You can even think texturally. Wood has a visual warmth, but when paired with spring's soft elements, linen, woven baskets, dried grass, or silk ribbons, it takes on a new dimensionality. A hand-woven throw draped across a dark wood armchair feels less formal, more touchable. A cluster of beeswax candles on a wood tray makes the table feel like an altar to light and season. It's important not to overwhelm or overstyle. Let the wood breathe. Let it be seen. The goal isn't to disguise it, but to allow it to become something more through its relationship to spring. In many ways, warm wood is the stage. And your seasonal accents, the fleeting performers. Each year, a new arrangement, a different bloom, a subtle shift in palette. The wood remains. The season dances. This interplay is what gives a Tudor-style living room its poetry. It is not just about contrast, but about respect between past and present, heaviness and light, permanence and impermanence. And as spring brings longer days and gentler air, your wooden interiors, once steeped in shadow, begin to glow. Spring in a Tudor-style living room is not about sweeping changes. It isn't about replacing history or masking the rich character of centuries-old design. Rather, it's a quiet layering, a gentle conversation between the architecture of the past and the vitality of the present. Through soft pastels and time-worn textures, through blooms that nod on the mantel and ivy that creeps along old bookshelves, we invite the season in not with fanfare, but with poetry. A mossy nest on the coffee table. A linen slipcover draped over a carved chair. A flicker of candlelight beside a weathered vase. These are not trends, they are touchstones. They whisper, they warm, they welcome. The Tudor living room, with all its structure and solidity, becomes tender in spring. It breathes. It listens. It allows the season to settle in its corners, soften its shadows, and warm its bones. And as you move through the space, coffee in hand, a book in your lap, birdsong floating through the window, you begin to feel it too, that timeless, slow unfolding that defines the most beautiful homes. Because in the end, Decorating isn't about objects, it's about atmosphere. It's about how a room makes you feel when the morning light strikes a floral painting just so. When you reach for a blanket and it smells faintly of lavender. When you pass a shelf and notice a tiny ceramic bird resting where none had been before. That's the magic of spring. And that's the promise of seasonal design in a Tudor home, not to rush or reinvent, but to reveal, slowly, thoughtfully, and with reverence. Thank you for spending time with us here on Charette Theory. If this journey into storybook charm and historic warmth has inspired you, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Let us know how you're refreshing your own home this season, what blooms you're bringing in, what corners you're softening. Until next time, may your rooms be as welcoming as a garden gate in spring, and may your days be filled with light, history, and quiet joy.